それではですね、1時50分になりましたので、午後の部ということで再開をさせていただきます。で午後の方はですね、3人の皆様からのお話、プレゼンテーション、そして休憩を挟んで、また3人の皆様からという、そういう予定となっております。で、最初のですね、報告してくださいます方は、国章様で、こちらのタイトルがあります通り、Rise of China ということで、英語でプレゼンテーションをしていただけるということです。そして、コメンテーターは、同志社大学の鈴木先生にお願いしたいと思います。皆さん、ぜひお願いします。
Hello, professors, fellow researchers, and students. I'm honored to be here to give a presentation about part of my PhD, The Rise of China. I'm Wang Guoqiang from Waseda University Graduate School of International Cultural Communication Studies, G6. While this topic may appear to be one of the traditional international relations paper based on two major powers between the interactions of China and the US, I believe it relates to our relation studies on global crisis. Because it is these two countries, China and the US, it's them that are going to lead the discussion over non-traditional security issues in the future. Therefore, we cannot have them stumbling over each other and fighting over hegemony. I believe the first part of global cooperation is beginning with these two major powers. And it's a matter of how the US and China get around their differences, and China being allowed to perform its role as a peace enabler and responsible major power, that the others in the world can be aspired to follow. I slightly changed the title of my presentation. The abstract may say global power, but I put in major power because it is less demanding for China. So this is the table of contents of the topics I want to do today. Later in this discussion, we'll see that the differences between China and the US is actually difference between different perspectives. So China can influence the world in a way that the US cannot. I believe that is an important aspect and an important function of China. So we begin with the background. The rise of China is a popular topic today, and it has been hotly debated for several decades. But even today, scholars don't all agree on which way that China is heading. The main worry is about whether China's rise is going to be peaceful or not. Can China, with its authoritarian government, fit into post-World War II liberal order under the US? Even after the collapse of communism, is there any way for China to appear responsible on the global stage under the US order? China has indeed taken a very unique path of development. On the one hand, it completely overhauled its backwards economies from the Cultural Revolution, and it turned itself into the second largest economy today. Meanwhile, its political system has remained largely unchanged. China has mostly embraced globalization and free trade. The World Bank has this on their website. Trade is central to ending global poverty. Countries that are open to international trade tend to grow faster, innovate, improve productivity, and provide higher income and opportunities to their people. Open trade also benefits lower income households by offering consumers more affordable goods and services. China has proven to the world that it is viable by pulling its own population out of poverty. Meanwhile, it has remained mostly authoritarian. Francis Fukuyama has said that what we may be witnessing is not just the end of the Cold War. The endpoint of mankind's ideological evolution and the utilization of Western liberal democracy as the final form of human government. Unfortunately, China has not reached this point yet. So the question is, how will China cope with the international system, the US leadership, with its one-party system? We look at the international reaction to China rise. Because IR so far is mostly based on Western scholars. There are two major schools of scholars that are quite divided in their opinions of China. The realist schools of scholars, people like John Mishimer, they're rather pessimistic and see China as a threat or a case of offensive realism. We're realists, since international society is anarchy, the best way to guarantee survival is to have maximum power, which is also meaning to achieve hegemony. So if China is trying to become a hegemony, then will history repeat itself, and there will be an inevitable war between China and the US, where Graham Allison coins the Thucydides trap. Meanwhile, the liberalists, they see China in a slightly more positive light. John Eikenberry have stated that China does not have to fight the US over hegemony. Western order is becoming easier to join, but harder to overturn. It is also in China's interest to be a part of this order. Robert Zoelik also said that China can become a responsible stakeholder, which is very similar to the responsible major power that the Chinese themselves have been calling for. Meanwhile, the Chinese themselves have also tried to assure the West and the world that their rise will be peaceful. Zhou Bijian, he was a advisor for the former Hu Jintao administration, and he has written China's peaceful rise to great power status in 2003 into Foreign Affairs. In summary, the big points of that paper was China is still a developing country. It does not want to kick the US out of Asia, but instead hopes that the US is a stabilizing force in Asia as well. And the most important part is China will never pursue hegemony. Although this started as an academic theory, it slowly became embodied in China's foreign policy. And because peaceful rise still sounds assertive, China has changed into peaceful development. So with China's recent assertiveness since arguably 2008, people are questioning whether peaceful rise is coming to an end or not. To understand China's rise, we need to look at the events that might have shaped China's rise up until now. The new China began its journey in 1978 at the beginning of Deng Xiaoping's reform and opening policy. At that time, China's policy was 韬光养晦，有所作为, which means hiding capabilities and find time, but do what is needed to be done. China avoided most of the turmoil in international society, stayed low and humble, and is focused on developing their own economy. It threw occasional tantrums to upset the US and set worrying trends for the world, like the Tiananmen incident of 1989. But they claimed that that was mostly a domestic problem, and other countries quickly scrambled to reestablish diplomatic relations with China. It was also less affected by the Asian financial crisis of 1997. While GDP did take a turn down, it was mostly due to structural problems of the Chinese economy, and less because of the financial crisis itself. China also ascended into the World Trade Organization in 2001. Since then, China has benefited greatly from free trade. Up until this point, we can see that China has done relatively well in developing and establishing itself with a positive image in global society. The turning point, however, was around 2008, when the US and the world went into a financial crisis. China saw America stumble in its own financial crisis and may have taken for granted that the US powers declined. And perhaps the American way and the international liberal order was not as successful as the Chinese had originally thought. Now, after that, in 2013, beyond 2012-2013, President Xi Jinping has been calling for more proactive actions of China, and China has become more aggressive in the international society. So people question, is peaceful rise ending? I believe China has lost humbleness of its past, and just because it's developing at a decent pace, it's gone ahead of itself, thinking that it's equal to the US. President Xi Jinping, he calls for more responsibility and proactive on China. I believe that is still a little early, because China still has too many domestic problems at home and mismatch with the US that it must address before it can take that responsibility. Yet, Xi is not wrong that China has to take this responsibility eventually, because China is too big and too large an asset to be ignored. However, the problem is the means that the Chinese are employing. They have ruined a lot of their responsible global image of the 90s and early 2000s, and they must tone down their assertiveness, because China is not as strong as the Chinese like to believe they are. Though people can rest assured when asking if China's peaceful rise is coming or coming to an end or not, because it is not. You need to look at what it means for China to end peace or rise. It means that they might have to confront the U.S., showing that they have the intention of overturning the norms and order established by the U.S. hegemony. Does China have the means to challenge U.S. order? You can tell from simple power comparison. In this case, power can be separated into 4 parts. The first is political power. China is still mostly a socialist country with Chinese characteristics. At most, they have regional influence and little influence outside their periphery in Asia. The most important thing here is China is not Soviet Union and therefore not an existential crisis to the U.S., as it does not seek to destroy democracy. However, they still have no signs of becoming a democracy at all. Meanwhile, the U.S., they're the leader of the free world and considerable influences over multiple countries around the world. The U.S. has political influence over Japan, India, Israel, Latin America, and much more. Other countries always have to take into account the U.S. factor when making their foreign policy, which is whether the U.S. intends that or not, it doesn't matter. David A. Lake, he had said that the U.S., they don't like the Chinese providing a new order in Asia because they were the sole superpower to do so up until this point. For economic powers, China is a market economy with a question mark. China says they're a mid-market economy with Chinese characteristics, but that is actually questionable. They used to have impressive GDP growth, but it's slowing down recently. And China is an industrial country trying to turn into a post-industrial country, but it's not doing that very well. They have the Belt and Road Initiative and the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank as Chinese-led international organization and initiatives. The US, they are the leader of the liberal market economy, and they still have the highest GDP in the world. They are also trying to struggle to transform into a post-industrial country, with recent implications that Donald Trump wants to bring back manufacturing to the US. They're the leader of the liberal financial order with the IMF and the World Bank. There's not much to say about the economic power. China and the US are the first and second largest power today, and any turmoil in economics between these 2 countries will have wide implications for the world. So, the trade war, we really have to be careful of that. Next, military power. China, they have more tanks and soldiers, but they don't have a very good navy, and their air force is poor. And China, they cannot deploy outside their immediate periphery, but China also has substantial cyber war technology. Meanwhile, the US, they may have less tanks and soldiers, but a blue water navy that can deploy anywhere in the world. We look at this. It suggests that China is actually not trying to hit the US with nuclear weapons because although China's missile technology is extensive, only very few of them can actually hit the US, and China is more interested in protecting their interest in Asia. Finally, soft power. Unfortunately, China doesn't have much. They have state-sponsored propaganda and pushing for their cultural heritage through Confucius institutes. And their only major like, global private firm is Huawei. Meanwhile, the American is an attractive model for a lot of allies. And the fact that China that doesn't have any real friends in Asia, Russia and Pakistan, they don't completely trust China. North Korea is North Korea. So you can see that China has actually had no real soft power to make itself look attractive to other countries. So what can we draw from this? There's 2 implications we can draw from this conclusion. Is that China, they are mostly a regional power. And at most, they want to aim to be the strongest power in Asia. The problem is, the Americans, they see that as Asian hegemony. So when the world asks whether China's peace or rise is ending, they look at the power comparison between China and the US. There's no way that China can challenge the US because the power gap just too much. Therefore, China should stay low and humble and not look to overturn international order. The problem here is that China, they want to show that they're strong enough and not to be bent to the will of the US. And they want to become a dominant power in Asia. They want to go by their own definitions of responsibility. That is a problem because the Chinese, they don't call it a hegemony. They call it the Chinese dream, the rejuvenation of the Chinese people, but the US, they see it just as hegemony. The US values of responsibility is democracy, balance of power, human rights, accountability, and the concept of manifest destiny. Meanwhile, Chinese values are central authority, stability, sovereignty, and this concept of all under heaven. So my input in the field is we begin with a series of policy recommendations for both China and the US, for China to appear more credible in the eyes of the US, and for the US to appear more like a partner that China is willing to work with, not just forced to work with because they are the US hegemony. They need to both put efforts in accommodating each other, and they should look for a point of compromise. I decided to analyze the point of compromise from all three schools of IR, because I believe once we get a complete picture, we can transcend the traditional theories of IR. So from the realist perspective, there was a mismatch of how each of them sees hegemony, and this creates a danger of hegemony war. China claims to have no interest in becoming a global hegemon, but the most dominant power in Asia. But the US finds that Asian hegemony is unacceptable, and China is attempting to expel the US from Asia. The way that China prefers to conduct bilateral negotiations, which is to the US looks like big power versus small power, is one of these sides. For example, when negotiating with the Philippines over the South China Sea, across 7 official documents the Chinese Foreign Ministry have published 159 mentions of sovereignty and 59 mentions of bilateral. It sets a worrying trend of whether China has coercive powers over their partners in Asia. Therefore, the solution here is, since China they don't find multilateral organization, such as the Hague Tribunal, very convincing, then we bring in organizations that they are actually interested in working with, like ASEAN. Recently, there has been a new clash between China and the US again in the South China Sea. It was the ASEAN that brought the Chinese and US defense ministers to a speaking table after the Council Security Summits. There's also a Beijing-Washington hotline for communication in times of crisis to lower chances of misunderstanding. Since China likes bilateral talks and US likes multilateral talks, then we bring in multilateral actors that China is more interested in working with. From the liberalist perspective, we look at more the market economy. China is a market economy with poor market economy practices. And there has been a massive trade deficit and accusations of Chinese dumping in various countries. China has also been accused of trying to steal technology or force foreign firms to hand over technology as a shortcut to Made in China 2025. An ambitious plan to turn China's low-end manufacturing to high-end by 2025. So the important thing here is China, they should not take the trade war too negatively. Take this as a challenge in the US, but accept it as a chance for China to change for the better. Poor trade practices will only tarnish China's good image in international society. Therefore, stop stealing technology and they should focus on training their own people, like they had in the past when China built the first airplane on all the lines. China can also learn from Japan and establish rules-based trade policies and not conduct business through personal relationships. As Japan also had trade frictions with the US in the past, maybe China can learn something from that. And the last aspect is from constructivism. It's a relatively new concept in IR, but basically it means that China is constructed to become a new enemy in the US. Many US national policies have targeted China as a sort of new enemy. So in that case, so for example, in the US national security strategy, there have been many mentions of China being a security threat to the US. Meanwhile, China, they can always frame the US as imperialist and invoke nationalism at home. But China is usually kept cautious of provoking the US and antagonizing it. Nonetheless, it is important for the US to reduce the amount of language that specifically targets China, but China also has to put effort in their own soft power to promote a better image of themselves. For example, China can deregulate some of their state-owned companies and focus more on private-owned companies for them to increase their image in international society. And also, China has a relatively untapped potential in the sector of soft power in Chinese esports. So to briefly conclude, the US and China, they're two major powers, and in the future, they'll be leading the discussion over non-traditional security threats. They must first solve their mismatch and work together. Economically, China has partially embraced the US order, but politically, not so much. But still, peace arises is not coming to an end. Therefore, this is the first part of my paper, and for the second part, I'll be focusing on China's mediation processes between Afghanistan and Pakistan, and China's Asian and African investments, and the US challenge with the Belt and Road Initiative with the Indo-Pacific strategy. I believe the first step is to overcome the mismatches between China and the US, and then China can become a responsible global power and contribute to international peace. Thank you.
Thank you very much. ありがとうございました。では続きまして、鈴木亜美先生からのコメントをお願いします。
I have two questions. The first one is with regard to the significance of your study to the relational studies. This workshop is intended to develop a new paradigm of international relations. So the first question is, let's say, how would your study contribute to the new paradigm of international relations? In your presentation, you mentioned realism, liberalism, and constructivism, and you also examined the source of power such as military, economy, and soft power. All these are pretty much classical in IR theory. We have been studying about it since 1970s, 80s, right? Can these existing paradigms of IR sufficient to analyze what is going on between the US and China? Or I can put this question in another way. Is US-China rivalry in the 21st century comparable to UK and rising Germany rivalry in the early 20th century? Is there something new in the major power politics between US and China today? That is my first question. The second question is more about the unit of analysis. You've been talking about China as a unitary actor. That's how I got it. But many China specialists, as well as East Asian international relations specialists, start to see China as not as a military actor, but more of a pluralistic, more as a China as a result of this pluralistic process within the country. For instance, the factions within the Communist Party of China, or the military, is also very powerful. And then the more government-linked companies, I don't know how it should be called in China, the national companies, state-owned companies, they are also becoming very powerful lately. So some China specialists start to see China's decision, not as a decision made by the power center within the China, but as a result of the competition, rivalry among those competing powers within the country. How do you see unit of analysis? The third question is about the impact of rising China on the international order. As you know, in 2016, July 2016, the International Permanent Court of Arbitration issued a ruling that China's claim on the 9-dash line does not have any basis in the international law. And the Chinese government basically said, no, this ruling, we cannot accept it. Although China has been a little bit more quiet than before. Witnessing what is happening in South China Sea especially, many IR specialists start to see that China has a different understanding on international order than us. What when we talk about this international order, we talk about the accumulation of sovereign state systems since the Treaty of Westphalia. But from time to time, we cannot but think that the map that the Chinese government has in their mind is not necessarily the map that we see. But there's a map that shows the spheres of influence of China. That stretches far beyond the border of China. That can even stretch to Taiwan or Okinawa, part of Southeast Asia as well. So seeing those things, some people start to think that maybe the international order China imagines is different from what we know as an international order, which was constructed since the Westphalia Treaty. What do you think about it? Do you think China is still playing within the existing international order as is understood by majority of the Western scholars? Or do you think China has a distinct image about international order?
Okay, thank you for your questions. So I believe I have to first make clear how my topic is related to this. I briefly touched on this in the beginning, but maybe I not made it clear enough. I believe that it is because China is this very powerful, second most powerful country in the world, right? And that China and the U.S., they always have conflicts with each other. So if they keep on fighting over each other, then the U.S. might never let China become this responsible global power, responsible major power that the Chinese can have potential of being. And China, for example, they don't have the complete same values as the U.S., so they can influence different actors that the U.S. maybe cannot. So, for example, China, maybe they don't have colonial hangover, so maybe they can influence the African countries that the U.S. in some ways cannot. So therefore, I believe that you first have to address the differences between China and the U.S. And when China and the U.S. they like decide to cooperate, then China can start addressing these non-traditional security issues in a sense that the U.S. cannot. Does that make any sense? So for the second question, unit of analysis, like you said, that there's different factions in China that are starting to become powerful. But also remember Xi Jinping, he has consolidated his power in the last 19th Party Congress. And he's basically become the most powerful man in China since Mao Zedong. So I still believe that Xi Jinping and the central authority in China still has considerable power to create these foreign policies or domestic policies. And of course, they have to take into consideration the other rising factions in China. But I still believe the central decision-making unit is still within the Politburo. And the third question about the impact of rising China, I believe China is still playing by the rules of international order. They might not have the same understanding because of their different culture to the U.S., but they don't have enough power to overturn the current U.S. established order, such as the liberal market order. But of course, China is benefiting a lot from the World Trade Organization, things like that. But yeah, I don't think China has enough power to overturn this, and they don't even have the intention to do it because they're getting richer from this. Why would they want to change anything? Though, in a sense, I still believe that China, because of their different understanding of international relations, China used to be this middle kingdom in Asia. As Xi Jinping's Chinese dream, he wants to rejuvenate this status of China becoming the most dominant power in Asia. He doesn't say that as Asian hegemony, but the Americans, they see this as an Asian hegemony. They don't like that. So there is a mismatch here that we first have to address. After we address this, China becomes this, I wouldn't say leader, but they claim to become a leader. They become this leader in Asia, then China can start assisting different parts of the world. Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah.
As you know, the United States understands China as a revisionist power, especially under the Trump administration. December last year, the White House published a paper, National Security Strategy, which basically depicts China as a revisionist power that tries to change the international order. So in the American administration basically said it tries to change the regional order and then try to replace U.S. as a global power. And it basically imposes a different international order on the region. That's how the United States sees. A while ago you said, as a response to my question, that China is not powerful enough to change the American order. So my question, actually it's the original third question. My question is, what kind of international order China envisions? You said a while ago, China is not strong enough to change the order. Maybe, but what kind of order does China want to realize?
I believe China, like you said, I think the Americans, they think that China will win. I think that the Americans think that China will want a global order. But the Chinese is just not interested in that. For China, they just want a strong China in Asia. That's their vision of global order. The US can do their stuff in the Western Hemisphere. You can do their stuff in Europe. And China can do their stuff in Asia. It's very similar to Samuel Huntington's Clash of Civilization. While it's not really a Cold War, it's not really a clash of civilizations. We have these different blocks of civilization around the world. And in this globalized community, they can work together to deal with non-traditional security issues that's beyond state control. So we won't have this thing like China, and I'm going to answer myself, but maybe in the future we won't have this thing as a China entity, but maybe as an Asian consensus to deal with, for example, the Rohingya crisis. Because Myanmar, it can't deal with this alone. But because China has considerable influence over Myanmar, and China has been supporting Myanmar in various things. Maybe China can influence the Myanmar government, and those two together with the rest of ASEAN, they can address this sort of refugee crisis in the future as well. So I believe this is a good step forward. The first step is to have the US admit that China is not this threat. Because I think it's just ridiculous in this 21st century we still have the Cold War mentality from the US.
Okay, thank you very much.
My name is Keiichi from Michigan University, and I'd like to raise a question that related to the third question of Professor Suzuki. And also you answered that also quoting a crash of civilization. But what is a kind of the culture? You also use the culture, but what is a Chinese different culture or Chinese different understanding? Is it Confucianism, or what is your main point that China is different from other countries, and especially you said culturally or civilization? What is your point of mentioning this?
That's a good point. Okay, that's a good question, because I think that China's understanding of culture is not necessarily Confucianism, because arguably Confucianism has been lost in cultural evolution, unfortunately. But there is still a sort of mentality in the Chinese that they value personal relationship a lot more than as in other Western communities. This is seen in the way that the Chinese like to do business. The Chinese, they focus on this concept of 关系関係. They want to have interpersonal connection a lot more than the Western people. And I think that this translates abroad into their foreign policy as well. So that's why they want more bilateral negotiations, because their leaders will get to know each other a bit more. And that's me. The US, the Western powers, they're more objective in a sense. So I think the Chinese, in general, they value this interpersonal connection between people, and that translates into into their foreign policy and when they're trying to deal with their adversaries abroad.
いかがでしょうか。
Thank you so much for your presentation. I'm Hyun Sato from Tokyo University. My question is related to the perception of IR scholars in China rather than your presentation itself. My question is very simple. Do you think the Chinese scholars of IR accept American perception of IR? If yes, so why? If not, yes, why? I want to ask you.
Well, thank you for your question. Because IR has been relatively dominated by Western scholars, and Chinese scholars' thought is, well, slightly different. In the sense that, the Chinese, they don't really have this sort of realism, it's not always such sort of competition and whatnot. And our countries are actually supposed to cooperate with China in the center. Because in terms of size, I think we all can admit that China is just bigger than the rest of the countries geographically. And they have they have more resources to exploit, and they can draw other people together because of their size. The problem with this is China, they don't have an attractive model to do this. They don't have much soft power to draw people together. So, yeah.
Hand up.手を挙げられますですかね。どなたかいらっしゃいますか。よろしいですか。もしよろしければいいですね。OK。はい。それではですね、こちらでこちらのプレゼンテーション以上とさせていただきます。それではご視聴ありがとうございました。それでは、引き続きですね、次の報告です。謝志海様からですね、中国の海洋進出と諸国の対応、アジア海洋秩序の再考としてプレゼンテーションをお願いいたします。
Good afternoon, everyone. Sorry to bring you to China Club again. Sorry to bring you also back to this international relations. Maybe it's foreign to some of you. I'm from University in Gunma, teacher,共愛学園 University. My topic here is one crisis that is brought by, well, the topic that the presenter mentioned, China's rise. That is particularly China's maritime expansion in the seas, in South China Sea, East China Sea. So what I want to do is take a look at China's maritime expansion in the recent years and how other countries have been responding to it, and try to see if we can find some solutions to this issue, particularly as this influences a lot to the international order in the seas, particularly in the Asia Pacific. And the existing, I will also talk about the international relation theories. I'm sorry to actually to do that later. maybe the existing theories have a lot of limitation as to solving this problem. So let me take a brief look at the situation of China's maritime expansion. In about 2011, I mean, this actually surprised to the world, where when China into 2010, China started to very openly talk about China's strategy, national strategy of developing its sea power. For example, at their 18th National Congress in 2012, the former president who sent a signal to the world that we're going to build a strong sea power. That surprised the world and also surprised some Chinese people like me, because traditionally we thought China is a continental country, and we don't have not too much to do with the oceans, with the seas. That's not the let's say sphere of influence traditionally for China. But since then, China actually very boldly moved to the sea. And this is also related to the foreign policy change around 2010, as the presenter just now already mentioned that China, well, to some extent, abandoned its the had the capability at the time, the policy that was actually set by the then China is actually well, criticized by other countries as having a very assertive, that was assertive foreign policy. And this particularly reflects well its policy to the sea. For example, East China Sea and South China Sea. I think there are well multiple incentives for China's maritime expansion. Some might say, oh, you see, China is having this hegemonic foreign policy. China is becoming very assertive. But we should take a deeper consideration of our China's motivation to develop the sea power, to expand its sea power. First of all, historically, we have many lessons. For example, the opium war, the Western powers, they didn't come from the land, they came from the sea. And also China lost the war, the Qing dynasty lost the war to Japan in the sea. Well, China had a great war, but it didn't function. It never worked. So what China see from the history is that we were wrong actually. We were thinking that well, the enemies are from the continent, but actually they're from the sea. So we need the sea power. If we don't have sea power, we will repeat the history, the history of so-called 1 century of humiliation, beginning from the opium war until the establishment of PRC in 1949. This is one thing. Another practical reason is we have the energy demand. So to well make sure we can import enough energy from overseas. So China has to has access to the sea channels. And there are three CCTV documentaries that shares China's maritime dream. I'm going to introduce very briefly. One is in 1988, there was a documentary called Gulosan, if we translate in English, the sadness of the river. Because traditionally, you see, we talk about civilization. China originally, like our civilization originated from the Yellow River. So we have the river revolution. We were very proud of it. However, after the Obia work, we realized that, particularly in this documentary, our civilization, the river civilization is bad. It's inferior to the maritime civilization, like the Western powers civilization. So we should abandon that kind of civilization. That was one third. And starting from that, in 2006, we have another documentary called The Rise of Great Powers. The background for that documentary is the many people started talking about the rise of China. And these documentary showed that if you look at history, all the great powers in history, they were sea powers. So if China wanted to become a great power, it must be a sea power, so you have to build a sea power. So in 2011, the third one is like a very bold claim to have a sea power for China. And there are recent developments of China's maritime expansion, like the One Belt, One Road. The One Road refers to the Maritime Silk Road. And there, things you know about China's moves in the South China Sea. And there's the link between the maritime expansion and the nationalism. This is raised by China Water controversies. The maritime design actually is closely linked with the rising, sometimes very radical nationalism in China. Okay, this is a brief look at the maritime Silk Road. Let's then take a look at this China's maritime expansion in East China Sea and South China Sea. In East China Sea, it's mainly about Senkaku, or the island issue. And we know that in about 2010, China and Japan had a lot of standoff on this issue. And Japanese government nationalized Senkaku Islands in 2012, since China used that as a chance to counter-strike, and China did such kind of embargo rare earths, boycott Japanese products, and they're also from the common peoples. They were the anti-Japanese demonstration. So that was a turning point for China's policy in the East China Sea. Before that, China was not so active in East China Sea. Since then, China strengthened its movement in the Senkaku area. Like even now, China is continuing its frequent waste of petrol, and China said the air defense in that identification zone. So we can see China get more national interest in the South China Sea, in the East China Sea since then. And the second is South China Sea is criticized as the Great Wall of Sight. That was the large scale of land reclamation since 2013. And also China reinforced its stance on the 9-dash line. This is 9-dash line. This is China's official stance about the boundary in the South China Sea. As most of you know, in 2016, the Philippines raised the issue internationally, and the arbitration denied China's 9-dash line claim, but China rejected. And also in South China Sea, U.S. and some other countries were carrying on the freedom of navigation operations, trying to solve the balance China. But it failed to contain China. China continued to expand its presence in this South China Sea region. So we can also see in the past 10 years or so, China also raised its military presence in South China Sea. Then let's take like the response from the other countries. First, Japan's response. Living in Japan, I can feel that Japan has a very strong sense of crisis regarding China's maritime expansion. There are a lot of reports, a lot of coverage about China's maritime expansion. I think Japan is receiving a lot of threat from China's maritime expansion. So for that, Japan first is to, for the sinker issue, to keep its very firm stance on this, and then enhance its self-defense ability. For example, increase the military budget, allow the right to collective self-defense. At the same time, Japan is trying to strengthen its alliance relationship with the U.S. Or other related countries like Australia, like India. So this is very traditional, let's say, realism approach. It's like the power balance approach. What about U.S.? Similarly, U.S. also felt a lot of threat from China's movement, particularly in the South China Sea. And it also strengthened its alliance with its Asian allies. And it had the soft containment or soft balance movement, as I mentioned, just freedom of navigation for operations. The problem here is, will U.S. risk military conflicts with China in the sea to protect the maritime order in the Asian Pacific? It seems like in both South China Sea, East China Sea, China is changing the maritime order, so the existing maritime order. If U.S. and other, let's say, countries in the so-called liberal or protect this maritime order, what kind of approach they can use? I think it's very limited. Like so far, the approach, like power balance, soft balance, all these actually so far doesn't work. So it's a military complex, a choice or option is very difficult. What about Southeast Asia's response, particularly with regard to South China Sea issue, because they are related countries? Ironically, they have very divided stances and responses. Like Philippines and Vietnam, they are calling for united voice. But other countries, like Malaysia, like Cambodia, they actually have more pro-China stance. And they are actually, in the group, in the ASEAN group, they are trying to play down the issue. So, ironically, in their ASEAN summit, well, they usually couldn't, make a clear, united claim to criticize China also. There are also, for the Philippines and Vietnam, there are also their dilemma, because security or for the maritime security, they have conflicts with China, but they also depend on China very much economically. So this is another dilemma for those countries. And what about the Indo-Pacific strategy for the so-called the Quad? That's the alliance between U.S., Japan, Australia, and India. This is also not that former alliance, and among these four countries, their stance are also quite divided. Whether to balance China, whether to contain China, they don't have unanimous stances. So if we look at this from the traditional international theory, relations theories, realism theory, okay, power transition theories, because China is getting more and more hard power, so accordingly, the order, maritime order in this region will change eventually. But which Asia's past be its future? This was a question raised by Amitabh Acharya. He said in 2004 that Asian states are more likely to battle with China than balance against it. Well, this was 14 years to predict that. But if you look at today, it's not all the case actually. Some countries are maybe backbiting with China, like Malaysia, like Cambodia. But some countries, or most of the powers countries in the region actually are counterbalancing against China. So what will be the maritime order in Asia? It's very difficult to answer. And what about the liberalism theory? Liberalism thinks that regimes and norms can regulate states' behavior. But China's behavior is not regulated. I think that is because we don't have enough institutions in Asia. We don't have more international laws on the sea territory disputes. So what we need to do is we should have more institutional arrangement to approach common interests. And from the constructivism, it says identity determines the state's behavior. So China actually has very divergent identities or values compared to other countries. I think that Cold War mentality still exists in Asia region. And in Asia, compared to European region, our nationalism is on the rise. This national identity is much more important than the Asian identity from the perspective of the countries. So the way out is we need to further to search for a common identity so that we can find common interests. So are we facing a new maritime order in Asia Pacific? This is a question I raised here. I'm not able to answer it. There are a lot of questions actually. So it depends actually on whether China ready to provide public goods or to have enough sense of responsibility while its power rises. And I think I don't have any more, so I have 1 minute left. So let me briefly introduce this slide. Some are saying that maybe we are having the beginning of the end of Pax Americanum, which is the peace under American hegemony. But is China ready to replace America as a leader, as a global leader? I think from the last presentation work, we also see that. I think the answer is no. And the scenario of so-called Pax Seneca, peace under China's hegemony, is not yet to come. Okay, let me stop here. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. それでは続きましてまた討論の方お願いいたします。
Thank you very much. The last slide is full of very pertinent questions that all of us really have to try to answer. It was a very insightful presentation. Again, thank you very much. I have two questions. The first one is really a question. Can you go back to the slide with the title, China's Maritime Expansion Analyzed by International Relations? the second one. Yeah, here. This is all. The third bullet, conditions for liberalism not right yet. Can you expand on this? I could not quite understand.
The argument by liberalism is if we have regimes, if we have norms, if we have institutions, then the state's behaviors will be regulated, will be limited. So states will look for not power, but for common interests to other countries. They will look for cooperation, not conflict with other countries. Like now, while China is looking for maritime interests, it's searching for more power in the sea, even though it will conflict with other countries. That means the argument by liberalism doesn't happen. Why? I think the reason is that so-called regime or norms or all these is not good enough now in Asia. Now, if we compare with EU, in Europe they already have very mature regimes norms. Countries are subordinated to a transnational organization, but in Asia you don't have such. The anarchical situation is still prevailing the order here. So the condition we need to actually to create the conditions for the liberalism to work effectively to contain China's ambitions.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I was a little bit surprised to read that line because I understand China is a party to the United Nations Convention of Law of the Sea, which is international institution, which is supposed to bind Chinese behavior. And then also there has been this negotiation on the code of conduct of the party to the South China Sea between China and ASEAN. It's really going on. Probably not by the end of this year, we cannot conclude, but probably next year. And then also ASEAN Plus cooperation has been going on since late 1990s. So I always saw China as a part of this international or regional institution, an international institution, and China has been benefiting from this kind of institutionalism. I still do not, we can talk about it later. Okay, and then the second one is question/comment. Your presentation, especially the former part of your presentation, was very, very interesting because that really reminded me of the fact that one of the sources of the conflict, let's say or potential conflict between China and US or China and Japan, comes from the mismatch between the self-image of China and then the image of China by the other countries. The self-image of China, as I understood from your presentation, is that Chinese people see China as a vulnerable country, which has to depend on the Malacca Strait and South China Seas for its energy import. And then also, China had to go through this history of humiliation after the Opium War. And it also lost so much sphere of influence in Asia under the tributary system because of the colonialization by the European powers. So Chinese government, as well as probably people at large, emphasizes this vulnerability and also loss of spheres, loss of powers in the past, the sufferings after the collapse of Qing dynasty. On the other hand, the image of China by other countries is total opposite. Many people tend to see China as a imperialist power that has big ambition to conquer Asia. As I mentioned in the previous presentation by Mr. Wong, the United States clearly states that China is a revisionist power that tries to change the existing international order and replace the United States as a global power. So, based on these images of China, Japan is reviewing its security policy. United States is doing this freedom of navigation operation in the South China Sea. Even UK, France, Canada, Australia are joining in patrolling in the South China Sea. And some of the Southeast Asian countries are trying to balance or hedging against China. Right? And then this reaction on the part of other countries make Chinese people and government feel more vulnerable. So it's really a vicious cycle of this mismatch of the self-image and the image of China by the other countries. How do you think we can accommodate this kind of mismatch of image? That is one question. And then another related question is how Chinese government is trying to convey its own worldview to the whole world. Thank you.
Well, very difficult question. Yes, the gap or the misperception exists. And what I mentioned here, for example, China's self-perception is not recognized properly by other countries. At the same time, China is also not recognized in the other countries' perception. So that is the in maybe international relations with a security dilemma, like for Japan and China. I just mentioned Japan saved a lot of trade from China's maritime expansion. But China similarly also saved trade from Japan, as Japan let's say talk about the right to allow collective self-defense, right, such kind of thing. I think the government need to think from the other government's position. Well, so far they're not doing this, and still power politics still dominates international relations, the practical international relations. Although we are talking about, well, we have liberalism, we have constructivism. Basically, countries, if we ask the countries what kind of rules your policy is based on, mostly it's realism. So, what I got from this morning's speech by Professor Sakai is also we need to deconstructing this existing international order, basic norms about the like supremacy of state actor, like the maybe even sovereignty concepts, or even the power politics. Like China is assuming a so-called China dream. So what is China dream? It doesn't mean that China becomes a strong power, a global power, the supreme power. That kind of standard, that kind of criteria is, I think, outdated. I think if China look back domestically, how to well reduce the gap between the rich and the poor, how to improve the quality of life of the common people. That's the real challenge, I think. So China should realize that this is very difficult for me to explain. This is one point how to look at this issue. Another thing you mentioned is China's government convey its own stance to the other countries, or to make other countries understand its position. I don't think so. I think China is not good at doing that. And the government the policy practitioners, mostly they are kind of domestically educated, so you don't have people like me in the government who will criticize the governments. So what I said here, for example, if I look at China's maritime policy, I can criticize it, and I can see where other countries' perception of China's maritime expansion. But China's government, those officials, maybe they don't see it, and they don't also, they are reluctant to explain its own position to other countries. And what they can say is always like, we are peace loving. We will not become a hegemony. So last month I attended a conference, it's called the Tokyo Asian Forum. We have scholars from Beijing and from Tokyo, and also government officials. They are doing a panel discussion talking about the misperception, trade perception between China and Japan. When Japanese people, Japanese scholars ask questions to the Chinese scholars, will China become a hegemony in Asia region? How China think of other countries' perception of how China? You say, no problem. China will not do anything back to you. So they don't have enough explanation about how China is. We are talking about peaceful rights or peaceful development. It's not. You think you are going to become a peaceful rights country, then you would be like that. It's how other countries perceive you are doing or not. So that part is very difficult for China's government, and it's the direction they need to work on actually.
I just had the impression that your explanation is a little bit perplexing, because on one hand, you mentioned about the vulnerable country, peace-loving country, or quality of people is more important. But on the other hand, you also mentioned about ancient tribute system of China, which is quite different from power balance, or quite different from a kind of the realism in today's sense. And also in the final part of your presentation, you also mentioned about the end of Pax American order. So what is the reality and what is the kind of image, or how that's China in reality we are just facing is not so quite clear, because you are just mentioning both sides always. So what is the reality is quite unclear for us. So could you explain that what is your opinion about today's situation in the real sense, or at least in your interpretation?
Thank you very much for your question again. Actually, I think even the Chinese government is not clear what they are pursuing for. For example, I mentioned here the tribunal system. There were. I cannot find it. So, tribunal system is what other countries are worrying about, that where China tried to return to the tribunal system, but actually the Chinese government said no, we are not looking for another tribunal system in Asia. And think what about the Pax Seneca? I don't think China has the ability, the capability to do that. So what China is really looking for, I don't know actually, frankly speaking, and the Chinese government, even the Chinese government is not really clear about what the goal they are looking for, they are searching. But one thing is clear, Chinese government, they have these, their behavior is largely defined by their historical experience. And one big factor is this, so I mentioned a little bit of the accumulation of 1 century. A century accumulation is the 100 years from the Opium War to the establishment of the PRC. So China actually is very sensitive to other countries' moves, behaviors. Whatever other countries doing to China, China will link it to the past experience when China was depressed by the Western powers and Japan. So that kind of past experience defined China's perception about its relationship with other countries, and accordingly define its behavior, its foreign policy. So China thinks that if you don't have enough power, you will be beaten. If you fall behind, you will be beaten. That's the historic relation from the so-called Renminyuan, where there's a place in Beijing where the eight Western powers invaded Qing dynasty, and they wrote that place that is what used to be the Paris of the Qing dynasty, and in Chinese historical textbook we learn that if you fall behind, you will be beaten. So you can see that even though China doesn't have a clear goal, China is trying to just gain power. That's what you need to do, because if you don't have enough power, you will be beaten. That's the logic of the Chinese power policy right now. Sorry, I don't know whether this answers your question or not.
But it seems to be quite dangerous. That,
it is. It is.
It's quite very vicious.
It is.
Professor said. So, are there any the solution for it?
It is. I think the solution is we have to abandon the outdated power politics. That kind of game to, let's say, enhance the regional integration in Asia, like what Europe is having. They say France and Germany. First of all, they say let's put the coal and iron together, because if you want to make weapons, you have to use the coal of iron, right? So let's be very transparent. I think in Asia we need similar steps. You don't see transparency in China's military development, right? I think China, if China wants to convince other countries that China is peaceful, right, China should show its strategy or what it's doing more to other countries. Need more transparency, I think.
Well, very briefly, I think that my question is the same as a question of Sato Sensei to the previous speaker. You mentioned about the ancient tribunal system. of China. And just you mentioned that there was such kind of historical and the traditional type of the pattern of the Chinese relation with the other countries. That affects the current Chinese policy towards others. So in that case, well, actually, I always wonder why most of the Chinese scholars use the Western type of the IR all the time, and especially realism. And actually, well, I understand that the Chinese has their own idea or notion of the international relation, or at least the relation between the China and the other countries. But otherwise, you don't use your own IR. Or my question is, how is the academic situation on the idea of developing your own Chinese type of international relation or Asian type of international relation, or at least critical study on Western type of international relation? Thank you.
Thank you. Well, very difficult question. But actually, China is trying to, actually, since 1990, early 1990, Chinese scholars started to, establish some kinds of China school of international relations theory. They tried, but all these failed. All these efforts, I think, failed so far. For example, some scholars try to trace back the history, like in the world time, the history or the tribal system, China's domestic regime. Try to get some ideas from that. When China has a bunch of small states within the country. How these countries interact with each other. Some try to get some theoretical ideas from them, but it actually it's not popular. And later, some people forget about it. And also recently, I think just now, Juan mentioned, we have some scholars who are talking about Guanxi relationship theory. This starts from the basic Chinese social phenomenon. It's like people have to have some kind of Guanxi relationship with other people. Otherwise, you cannot get promotion. Otherwise, you cannot get what you want. And this also can apply to the countries. Some scholars mentioned about it. I think this also doesn't have the universal implication for other countries. What I see China's position is, China is having a very embarrassing position here. Is it try very hard to have its unique Chinese school of international relations, but it failed to, and it can't get rid of the Western international relations theory. That's why most of the scholars in China still they are using, and you can see this scholar is he's a realism scholar or he's a liberalism scholar. They have some label for different scholars. That means they are still worshiping their Western theories, and that's the limitation also for China's soft power. Thank you.
Thank you very much. ありがとうございました。はい。それではですね、お時間となりましたので、こちらででは、続きましてですね、今度はまた別のトピックですけれども、小坂裕樹ですね、世界女性会議に参加するということ、国連婦人の10年と世界女性会議をめぐる日本人女性たちの歴史経験ということで、こちらはですね、資料、特にパワーポイントは用意してなしでということでおっしゃっておりますので、前の方どちらでもおいでいただいて、プレゼンテーションをお願いいたします。
関西外国語大学の、小阪裕樹と申します。本日は貴重な機会いただきましてどうもありがとうございました。はい、ですね、私は大学ではアメリカ史を教えています。私は今日のタイトルにありますように、私は必ずしも女性史やジェンダー史の研究者ではありませんし、日本現代史の研究者ではないわけですね。もともとアメリカ外交史からスタートして、戦後直後の国連を中心とする国際関係史をもともと研究してきました。そこでですね、ここ2年ぐらい、2年弱ぐらいの間にですね、新しいテーマとして今回の発表のテーマをやり始めたんですね。そこでですね、まだまだ未熟な段階ですけれども、ちょっと中間発表的なものになりますけれども、ここでちょっと皆さんに聞いていただいて勉強をさせていただければと思って今回参加させていただきました。それではちょっと座って発表させていただきます。本報告は国連婦人の10年と世界女性会議の開催という国連のキャンペーンが日本の女性たちに与えた影響について一つのラフスケッチを提示するものです。先行研究として本研究は特に国際人権レジームとローカルな社会運動の連動に関する一連の研究を意識しています。それらの研究は人権規範がどのように実効化するのかという問いのもとに当該国の利益認識や人権規範の社会化を論じてきました。そこでは例えばブーメランとかカスケードのようなモデルが想定され、それが各地の実証に付されて検証されてきました。これらの一連の実証研究はですね、政策や世論の変化といった大きな政治過程に注目してそれを因果推論的に分析するものでした。その結果ですね、国連婦人の10年というキャンペーンが作り出した国際的な潮流とさまざまな形で向き合ってきた個々の女性たちの歴史経験、彼女たちの認識や生き方の変化を論じるものではありませんでした。これに対して本報告は女性たちの語りと階層に注目しながら国連と国際人権が個人に対して影響を及ぼした瞬間をグローバルとローカルが相互に作用する事例として捉えていきます。近年英語圏では特に人類学の領域において権利概念を個人が内面化していくプロセスの研究が出てきています。最近私もこういう方面の研究に接続していく必要性を感じているんですけれども、まだ現時点では本格的にはそこまで実践には至っていませんけれども、それは今後の課題ということになりますけれども、今日の報告は現時点でいろんな自治体のアーカイブとかいろんな国会図書館とか自治体の文書館を回って得た資料に基づいて、歴史研究として中間報告的なラフなスケッチをちょっと示してみたいというのが今日の報告の目的となります。はい、それではプリントに基づいてですけれども、本報告はまず最初に前史として日本の国連加盟から1975年の国際婦人年までの期間における日本人女性と国連の関係をまず確認するところからスタートしてまいります。最初のパートです。日本の女性運動の指導者たちは早くから国連の重要性を認識してきました。日本が国連に加盟することが決まった56年の12月、代表的な女性団体の代表者たちが重光外相のもとを訪れ、日本政府の国連代表団に女性代表を少なくとも1人加えること、国連女性の地位委員会に日本代表を送ること、国連事務局および日本代表部職員に相当数の女性を加えることを要請しました。この動きの中心にいた市川房枝や藤田多紀といった女性たちの運動は国連と国際社会の潮流を見据え国連に日本人女性を送り出すことをテコとしながら日本国内における女性の社会進出の突破口を開こうとする試みだったと言えます。翌年57年の7月、主要な女性団体の代表たちが藤山外相と会見し国連への婦人の協力についての要望書を提出しました。 同時にこれらの団体による連帯のプラットフォームとして国連 NGO 国内婦人委員会という組織を結成することで国連の理想実現に協力することを申し合わせていきました。この委員会は市川夫妻が音頭を取ることによって8月1日正式に結成を見ました。国連および国連関係諸機関に協力、必要に応じて政府に意見を表明、もしくは要請することなどが目的として掲げられていました。これ以後、毎年の国連総会において、この委員会は日本政府代表団の一員として女性を推薦してですね、これを外務省がこれを採用して起用するということが慣例となっていきます。さて、このようにして従来は男性の領域とされてきた大きな政治や政策決定の過程に女性を参入させて女性の視点からの女性政策を作っていく、そうすることで男女平等政策を実現していく、このやり方はですね、市川夫妻をはじめとする運動家たちが戦前から一貫して展開してきた政治手法でした。日本の国連加盟から60年代を通じて日本の女性運動は女性の立場から国連に協力し国連の場に日本人女性を送り出すことを主眼としそのことによって国内における女性の社会進出の基盤を整えようとしたのだと言えます。さて、プリントの2つ目のパートに入っていきます。ここでは75年のメキシコ会議第1回世界会議に始まる国連女性の10年と95年の北京会議における日本人女性の世界会議体験を検討していきます。国連が女性の権利問題への取り組みを展開する中で国連は75年を国際婦人年と設定して世界女性会議をメキシコで開催することを決めました。この第1回の世界女性会議は平等、開発、平和をテーマとしその成果として世界行動計画を採択するとともにこの年の国連総会は翌76年からの10年間を国連婦人の10年に設定していきました。ここで特筆すべきは政府間の公式の会議と並行して NGO フォーラムが開催されそこでは各国から集まった普通の女性たちが参加しその経験をシェアしさまざまな刺激を受ける場となったことです。以下ではメキシコ会議に参加した斉藤千代という女性の語りから世界会議に参加した歴史経験が日本人女性にとって持った意味を考えてみたいと思います。この斉藤千代は女性情報誌アゴラを主催するジャーナリストでした。メキシコ会議にあたってアゴラもまた会議参加のチームを送り出しました。本当に小規模な運動に過ぎないこのアゴラがはるばるメキシコまでチームを派遣することは困難なことでした。旅に費やしたエネルギーを10とすればその9までもが事前準備それも会議参加以外の雑事に費やされた感があったというふうに斉藤は回顧しています。参加希望者の落語も相次ぎました。この当時女性が家族を残して2週間にわたって家を留守にするということが非常に難しい時代でした。困難を乗り越えてついに参加に至ったメキシコ会議の場も斉藤たちにとっては苦い思い出となりました。アメリカからはベティ・フリーダンのようなフェミニスト運動の歴戦の闘士たちが参加しそのパワフルなレトリックとパフォーマンスによって聴衆の心をわしづかみにしていました。ところがその一方で日本人の代表は数字の羅列でクールに過ぎたということです。会場に来ていた200人もの日本人女性は英語力の不足もあって沈黙するのみでした。斉藤自身はまずは日本語で話し通訳に訳してもらう腹積もりで来ていました。しかしセッションでは日本語はダメ、英語で2分だけというふうに出花をくじかれてそこで英語でたどたどしい発言を試みますが声が震え体が震え話したいことが話せませんでした。斉藤は自らの認識の甘さ、準備の不足、通訳の利用を当然と思い込んでいた自立心のなさをこの時痛感します。 伝えたいことを伝えることができなかった彼女は、日本人女性の過去と現在と題した英語のレポートを会議事務局に提出して、この日の会議を終えました。さて、数日後、会場にやってきた斎藤たちは驚きました。会場案内の掲示には、日本人女性の過去と現在と題された分科会が新たに設定されていたのでした。彼女たちが提出したレポートが、これに基づいて事務局が分科会を新たに設定したのでした。これは斎藤たちにとって文字通り寝耳に水の出来事でした。提出済みのレポート以外何の準備もなく、開始5分前になって慌てて通訳を探しているという、そういう始末でした。通訳の力を何とか借りて、やはりおぼつかない英語で分科会をこなした斎藤は以下のように回答しています。国際会議を傍聴しようと思い、参加することを考えなかった私たちの甘さ、準備不足、それを情報不足と言ってしまえば簡単だが、もっと本質的なものが潜在していたことにやっと気がついた。例えばレポートを提出する。それがきっかけで分科会が開催されるとは夢にも思わない。なぜか、せいぜい事務局の人が読み、あわよくば会議の資料として残されることしか期待していないからだ。なぜ期待しないのか。常に無視されること、却下されることに慣れ続けてきたからだ。民主主義という、しかし私たちは本当に自分の頭で考え、自分の足で立ち、あらゆる疑問に果敢に立ち向かったことがあっただろうか。ここで彼女の内政は民主主義の主体としての自分たち日本人女性の在り方に及んでいると言えます。しかし、客観的に見るならば、こういう斎藤たち民間人女性参加者たちの苦戦もやむを得ないことだったと言えるかもしれません。当時の新聞報道を見るとですね、藤田滝をはじめとする日本政府の公式の女性代表たちもまたこのメキシコ会議の場で無力感を味わっていたのが分かります。日本政府の公式代表団は各省から選抜された11人からなっており、そのうちの7人が女性でした。彼女たちはあらかじめ準備されたスピーチ以外に発言することができませんでした。多くは大規模な国際会議を経験したこともなく、審議の流れなどの把握もできていませんでした。彼女たちは帰国後の報告会ではメキシコで何をやっていたのかと追及されてしどろもどろになったというふうに報じられています。さて、3番目のパートに入ってまいります。ここでは国連婦人の10年と世界女性会議が個々の女性たち、ひいては日本社会に対してどんな意味を持ったのかという問題を考えます。世界女性会議の NGO フォーラムへの参加者は、会を追うごとに増えていきました。プリントに四角の中に囲ってある数字の通りです。各国の女性運動にとって NGO フォーラムの場で世界各地から集まった女性たちと出会い交流することは重要な経験となっていきました。日本人の参加者も大きく増えていきます。第2回の世界会議以降、特に自治体による派遣が大々的に展開されていきました。以下では参加した女性たちの声を少し拾ってみたいと思います。自治体から参加した女性たちが残した報告書はですね、例えばアフリカの女性たちのエネルギーに圧倒されたというような、とてもポジティブな感想がたくさん見られ、とても刺激を受けたことが伺えます。しかし、自治体派遣という形で、制度化が進んだことの、負の遺産でしょうか。先ほどの斉藤千代の語りが持っていたような厚さがちょっと希薄化している感も否めないのも事実です。行政によって制度化されてしまったことによって、団員の独自の問題意識と主体性を発揮する余地が狭まったということもあるのかもしれません。一部の参加者からは不満の声も上がっているのが見られました。あとですね、また事前研修を受けた上で臨んでいるにもかかわらず、いまいち問題意識の深まりを感じさせないような感想文も、それなりに見られます。世界各国の女性の姿を見てて楽しかったと語りながら、反面、民族衣装に身を包むその中身は女性差別、雇用、教育等想像以上に悲惨であった、素晴らしい日本に生まれて改めて幸せを実感できたといった感想や、 日本を離れ日本を見習すことができ、我が国の素晴らしさを再確認したといった記述、ホームステイなどを通じて北欧の人々が日本経済や日本人の勤勉さを称賛することを聞き、改めて日本の良さを実感できました。そういった記述など、当時の経済大国化を背景とした、いわゆる日本すごい認識が、散見される、のです。よく歴史研究では70年代といえばウーマンリブのうねりの中で女性たちも自らの主体性を確立した、あるいはベトナム反戦やアジア太平洋戦争についての女性自身の加害者としての責任を問うようなそういう視点を獲得したとされる時期ではありますけれども、そうした当事者意識を前提として日本自身の問題を内省するような姿勢があまり見られない人もそれなりに散見されます。特にこの時期の問題意識の欠如したグループが見られたことを如実に示すケースとしてナイロビ会議に参加したついでに南アフリカを観光してしまうアパルトヘイトが問題になっている時期ですけれども、国連で経済制裁が出ている時期ですけれども、そんな南アフリカを観光でついでに行ってしまうようなグループも見られて、これは外務省が動いて行政指導に動くということになりましたけれども、そういうグループも見られました。こういったですね問題も一部ありつつもですね、でも本報告で強調したいのは、国際婦人連の面白さとしてはやっぱり官民の共同があったということが指摘できると思います。この時代はいわゆる革新市政の時代でした。高度成長が生み出した公害のような都市問題に対して、経済の論理から生活の論理へと転換を主張する住民運動が革新市政の時代を後押しし、市民と行政の間の対話と連携の回路を開いていきました。日常生活において最も切実な要求を持っている女性たちがこの時の主役となりました。言ってみればこの時期女性たちは主権者としての民主主義の力量を少しずつ身につけていたと言えるかもしれません。本報告で特に注目しているのは、大阪や名古屋での目覚ましい動きです。国連がお膳立てをした国際婦人連というバナーの下で、それに基づく日本政府の女性政策と啓発事業が、まさに何かをしようと、人を駆り立てる起点となって、その役割を果たしていたことが伺えます。国連婦人の10年は世界女性会議に参加した女性たちだけでなく、参加していない社会の裾野において着実に女性たちに影響を与えていたということが言えると思います。1980年、大阪府婦人問題アドバイザー養成講座というのを始めていきます。この講座なんですけれども、毎年60名の定員に対して800人を超える応募が集まるほどの人気を博していました。この講座の卒業生は大阪各地で婦人問題啓発の役割を果たしていきます。大阪府公文書館で一部保管されているこの講座の修了論文集があるわけですけれども、これを読んでいくと生活者としての彼女たちの現実と、そして希望、それから厚さを見て取ることができます。以下少し紹介していきますけれども、彼女たちがこの大阪府の講座を知ってこれを受講しようと思い立ったのは、彼女たち自身の苦い経験によるものでした。女に学問はいらないと言われ、女性の仕事はいつも男性の都合で左右されることへの疑問と解決の糸口をつかみたいという思いがそこにはありました。講座は同じ悩みや経験を抱えた仲間との出会いの場ともなっていきました。彼女たちが見出したのは、女性がこれまで個人として直面してこざるを得なかった問題に対して、仲間を得て社会という次元で向き合うことの可能性だったと言えます。つまり、国連の動きが、草根の女性たちにダイレクトに影響しているとは言えないわけですけれども、しかし、国連女性の10年という旗印が掲げられて、これに沿って進められた官民の女性政策が女性たちに彼女たちの問題を説明する言葉を与えて、問題意識を研ぎ澄ます機会を提供したと言えると思います。国連婦人の10年は世界女性会議に実際に参加した女性たちだけでなく、 社会の裾野において着実に女性たちにも影響を与えていたのです。このような形でですね、最後のパートになりますけれども、沖縄からも、たくさんの女性たちがこの世界会議に参加していきました。沖縄の場合はですね、ナイロビ会議に取材に行く代わりに、そのナイロビに行くお金を使ってですね、沖縄本島において沖縄版の世界女性会議の NGO フォーラムを開けないかということで、うないフェスティバルというのが企画されていきます。このフェスティバルの参加者が後の沖縄のまた住民運動の一つの草の根の土台になったということがいろんな語りと回想から読み解けていける話です。で最後のところですけれども、あるいはですね、沖縄だけじゃなくて本土からも例えば長谷川照美さんという方の語りと回想を最後に紹介していますけれども、彼女もですね、やっぱり北京会議に参加してですね、この北京会議でやはり悪戦苦闘するわけですけれども、ここでやっぱり仲間たちとこれを経験して、これを学習することによってですね、自らのエンパワーメントを実現していったということを語りと回想として残しています。具体的にはフェアトレード商品を販売していく、自らでそれを企画して自営業を営んでいくということですけれども、ここにはですね、このフェアトレードの営業をすることによってまずいわゆる南の国々の女性たちのエンパワーメントに自分たちで貢献していこうというだけじゃなくて、その活動が自分たち自身のエンパワーメント、自分たち日本人女性のエンパワーメントにつながっていったんだということが、その世界女性会議に参加した経験で得られたことだったということを彼女は繰り返して語っています。そういうですね、最後になりますけれども、こういう彼女の語りっていうのはですね、エンパワーメントを強調する彼女の語りっていうのはまさに世界女性会議への参加が社会の裾野において女性たちの主体化とエンパワーメントの契機となったことを示していると思われます。ちょっと予定では最後にこの企画に重ねたちょっとインプリケーションを語りたかったわけですけれども、ちょっと時間の関係でここまでということで一旦発表を終わりにしたいと思います。どうもありがとうございました。
またフォローの時もございます。今東京外国大学の中山由先生にコメントを聞いてどうぞよろしくお願いします。
東京外国語大学の中山です。私自身ジェンダーは全く門外漢なので、どれぐらい具体的な質問ができるかというと、ちょっとなかなか細かいことをお聞きするのも場違いだと思うので、全体の印象と最後おそらくお時間の関係でお話しいただけなかったこの研究会へのインプリケーションに関してちょっとお聞きしたいなというふうに思います。まず報告なんですけれども、非常に詳細な語りを中心に構成されていて、割とIR では規範がどういうふうにして、レジームで授与されていくのかという規範起業家なんかを中心とした下から上への動きが取り上げられることが多いのですが、本研究はむしろ逆のベクトルをフォーカスされていた点が非常に興味深いなというふうに思いました。でただですね、ややちょっと気になった点で本報告の課題というところで、国連と国際人権が個人に対して影響を及ぼす、瞬間を捉えてっていうふうなことを強調されていたんですけれども、お話を聞いている限りご自身でもご指摘されていたんですけれども、国内の官民の共同がやはり影響したとか必ずしも国連と個人という単純な相互関係ではなくて、それ以外も、本研究家がいろいろ関係性ということを強調してますけれども、国内のさまざまな動きと非常になんていうか複雑に交錯する中で、個人、 日本の女性がエンパワーメントされていったんではなかろうかなというところで、その点をもう少しダイナミズムが共通されるとより面白い論考になるんじゃないかなというふうにお聞きしていて感じました。で具体的にはちょっと専門的な知識がないのでややもしかしたらまた外れになるのかもしれませんけれども、この本報告が扱われている期間ですね、1975年から広く取ると1995年まであって、おそらくその過程で国内でも男女雇用機会均等法が制定されたりというふうなそもそも社会的な変化があったり、あるいはちょっとレジュメにはなかったんですけどご指摘されていた点で公害問題の抗議運動というものを通して女性が非常に社会運動に参加する機運になったというふうなご指摘があったので、国内の女性をめぐるなんというかこういう表現が正しいのかわからないんですけど、空気の変化っていうんですかね、そういうものもあったんではなかろうか。その話とこの国連への参加というものがどういうふうに関係しているのかというのがもし分かれば教えていただけるといいのかなと思いました。それからこれは私が割と国際的なレジームであるとかガバナンスをやっている観点から興味が個人的にあることなんですけれども、この日本人女性が参加しているこの会議自体も非常に扱う話題が変わっていってるんじゃないのかなというふうに思いました。75年っていうのはいわゆる女性差別撤廃条約の締結前なので、おそらくそういうのを作ろうというのがなんとなく主眼だったのかなというふうに思ったり、その後例えばこのいただいた資料を見てちょっと驚いたのは、フェミニズムあるいはジェンダーで活動の中心地というのはどちらかというと欧米のイメージを持っていたので、この会議がそもそもなぜ最初にメキシコで開催されたんだろうかということであるとか、ナイロビで開催されたんであろうかというふうなその開催地といわゆる会議のアジェンダの関係なんかもあるんじゃないかなとなんとなく推測するんですけども、そういったその会議自体、国際的な会議自体もおそらく変わっていっている中で、日本人女性がその会議への参加を重ねることによって得られる刺激もまた変化してるんじゃないのかなというふうに思いましたので、そういうふうな会議ごとの変化っていう流れが見えると、よりその長いスパンで見た時のこのご報告の面白さっていうのが際立つんじゃないかなというふうに感じました。であとは最後に多分お時間の関係でおっしゃっていただけなかった部分なんですけれども、やはりこの人権のお話で国際的な人権規範が拡張する運動というものが、例えば本研究課題が着目しているように何らかのこのグローバルな危機みたいなものに誘発されて同じようにやはり起こったということであれば、どんな危機があったのかなっていうのが90年代の沖縄の確か少女暴行事件みたいなのがちょこっと書いてあります。それがグローバルな危機なのかちょっとさておきですけれども、何か危機なようなものがあって、こういったムーブメントを飛躍的に推進するようなことになっているのか、なっていなければなっていないというところなのかもしれないんですけども、その危機と女性のこのエンパワーメント拡大の流れになんか面白いインプリケーションがあれば教えていただきたいなというふうに思いました。以上です。
コメントとご質問いただきましてありがとうございました。そうですね、まず最初に国際関係論の IR で一般的にこうだけれどもこの報告ではこうだっていうまずそのコントラストをまずご指摘いただいたわけですけれども、私としてもですねもともとはヒストリアンとしてスタートしているわけですけれども、やっぱりでも理論と歴史の対話ということを意識しながら研究を進めていこうと進めているつもりでして、で IR におけるそういうソーシャライゼーションの研究ですねには当然意識しながらですね進めていこうと考えているところです。でただ今言ったその社会化国際規範の社会化ソーシャライゼーションっていうのもちょっと私としてはちょっとこれやっぱり2通りの社会化があるというふうに考えていて、一般的に IR のいう規範のソーシャライゼーションというとこれ国際社会レベルで社会化されていく過程 つまり国際社会レベルの個々のアクター、つまり主権国家のような個々のアクターに社会化されていく過程というのがフォーカスされるわけですけれども、その国家レベルで社会化される過程だけじゃなくて、その個々の人間によって内面化される、社会化される過程というのも同時にやっぱり見ていかなきゃいけないということで、この社会化というところをその2つのレベルがあるということで、そこをちょっと丁寧に見ていきたいというのが私の問題意識ですね。でそれに関連して国連と人々の間の相互作用ということで、ここをもうちょっと詳しくダイナミズムを持って描くことができるのではないかということで、それは本当に私の課題でして、これからもっともっと勉強してやっていこうと思っているところです。でそのまさにですね、国連と人々の間の相互作用というのは、これはまさに2つのレベルのソーシャライゼーションが関わっていると思うんですね。つまり当然普通の人々にとっては国連っていうのはもうはるか遠い雲の上の存在で、日常生活とは何の関係もない存在なわけですけれども、ただですね、やっぱり国家の政府にとってはですね、やっぱり国連レベルの女性の権利みたいなトレンドにですね反するような行動を取ると、やっぱり国際的な恥になってしまいますので、国家レベルとしてはまずですね、その国際的な規範を社会化して、でやっぱり自分の国でもそれをインプリメントしていかなきゃいけないっていう、そういう、ソーシャライゼーションの圧力にまずさらされているわけですね。で日本政府はその下で国内の女性政策を展開していくわけですけれども、その日本政府の啓発事業が今度は人々のソーシャライゼーションを生み出していったみたいな、そういう二重の段階みたいなものがあると思っていて、この辺はですねやっぱりこの70年代の日本現代史の研究とも接続しながら、ちょっと複数の分野を股にかけながら、ちょっとダイナミックな歴史叙述として描ければいいのかなというふうに考えています。それからですね、世界会を追うごとにはテーマが変わっていって、刺激も変わるだろうというお話で、これは本当にその通りだと思いまして、もっともっと私これから詳しく分析していかなきゃいけないと思うんですけれども、まず会場がメキシコとかナイロビみたいなところになるっていうのは、これやっぱり国連史の問題としてとっても重要でして、60年代以降脱植民地化の時代の中でアジアアフリカ諸国が一斉に国連に加盟していきますので、国連総会の構造変動が起こるわけですね。第三世界に一気に風が吹くような時代になっていくわけですね。そんな中でこれから第三世界の開発とか貧困ということが国連の大きな課題としてクローズアップされていくわけで、その一環として会場がメキシコだったりナイロビが選ばれたりするようになるわけですね。でその中でテーマもですね、やっぱり平等とかいうテーマから、徐々にその女性に対する暴力とか貧困とか、そういうふうに当然力点を置かれるポイントがまた移り変わっていくんですけれども、その中で女性たちの日本の女性たちの運動のフォーカスするポイントも当然変わっていくと思いますので、そこら辺またより詳細に論文化するときはもっと詳細に描くことが課題になると思います。でですね、3点目のインプリケーションとしては危機とどう関連するのかということですけれども、当然この企画にアプライするときにですね考えたわけですけれども、私の場合ちょっと危機っていうのはもうちょっと広く捉えていると、目の前にあるテロとかそういう危機だけじゃなくて、その女性の地位とかそういうジェンダー平等の問題とかも含めてですね、これ危機と呼べるかどうかは分かりませんけれども、そういう問題に直面した時の女性たちのグローバル関係を分析したいということで、そういう問題意識からちょっとアプライさせていただきました。やっぱりですね、最後語れなかったんですけれども、国連っていうのは主権国家だけじゃなくて、いろんな非国家主体の市民たちも出会う場所なわけですね。この出会いがどんな刺激を各国の地域社会にもたらしていくのか、そういうところをですね、これまで国際機構の歴史っていうとそういうところはなかなかやってこなかったわけですけれども、そういうところをいろんな分野を股にかけながらやっていければいいなっていうのが私の この会に対するインプリケーションとして最後に申し残しておきたかったということですね。とりあえずちょっと長くなっちゃいました。こんな感じでお願いします。
フロアの皆様からいかがでしょうか。お願いいたします。
ご発表ありがとうございました。慶応大学で大学院生をしております佐藤と申します。ですね、この発表の中では基本的にその女性たちの歴史経験ということで、語りが全て女性の語りで、全体を埋め尽くしていくという構成だったかなと思うんですけれども、女性たちのね、そもそも女性と男性っていう性を2つで分けるのかどうかっていう話はあるんですけど、とりあえずそれは置いておきまして、女性たちのその歴史経験がどのような変遷をたどったかというのは、ある種外的視点であるところの男性の語りであるとか、この社会的他のアクターの語りというものも同様に重要になってくるのかなと個人的には考えているんですけれども、今後の研究の発展ということも含めてお伺いしたいのが、その女性の語りだけで一貫して通していかれるのか、それとももっと外部の女性以外のアクターの語りというものを複合的に考えていくのかといったところに関してぜひ教えていただければ幸いです。
はい、ありがとうございます。そうですね、男性と女性を分けるのが適切なのかどうかっていうのは当然聞いてると疑問に思われるかもしれませんけれども、やっぱり私の研究の流れがですね、私今までアメリカのユダヤ人とか黒人運動みたいなアメリカのマイノリティ運動がいかに国連を使ってきたのかみたいな、そういう研究からスタートしてきたわけですね。でその一環でやはりいわゆるマイノリティとしての日本人女性というカテゴリーに注目して、その動きにフォーカスしていこうみたいな、こういう流れで今日の発表のテーマに立っているので、とりあえずその女性というカテゴリーに絞って研究していくというところには私自身はこれまで違和感がなかったわけですけれども、当然ですね、これに関与した他の男性たちとか、あるいはそうですね、もう当然いるわけですので、女性にこだわらずに、その市民運動のっていうようなカテゴリーでやっていくことも可能だと思いますので、そうですね、ちょっとこれまであまり意識してなかったんですけれども、ちょっとそういうところもこれからアンテナをちょっと広げてですね、考えていければと思っています。とりあえずそんな感じで答えになっていますでしょうか。
ありがとうございます。
もう一つぐらいという感じでしょうか。お願いします。
ごめんなさい。自分のやれないことやらないことについて質問するのは心苦しいんですけど、ちょっと一回通して聞いた印象に過ぎないんですけど、先生の主な論点というか立場というのは、例えば最後にインプリケーションとしておっしゃったように、国連の空間とかまであくまでもパーソナルな大変パーソナルな出会いであるとか、それから個人と国連という場の出会いとか、そこで体験を通して、非常に不可逆的な強い何か信念を抱いて、それを出身国に持って帰って変えていくという、そういうベクトルもあったんじゃないかっていう話は非常に面白かったんですが、結構そこに興味があるんだろうなと思いながら聞いてたんですが、そうすると今日の話も非常にパーソナルな体験を言葉にしたような話がずっと続いて面白く聞いてたんですけど、で最初のコメンテーターの先生の話のようにちょっとはもうちょっとダイナミックに表現できないか、ダイナミズム的に表現できないかなとは思いながら聞いてたんですけど、こういうふうに整理されるとそういう要求も出てくるかと思うんですけど、ちょっと言わずもがなできないことかもしれないですけど、例えば5ページに日本すごい認識というふうにカテゴライズされて、でこういう話があったと。これいわゆる日本すごい認識とおっしゃいますけど、これは言ってみればいわゆるとんでも言動、いわゆるありえない認識というふうに先生が認識されてるんだと思うんですね。でこれはよくある話で、結局のところこれが問題なんじゃなくて、会議って何やってたんだな、深く物事を考えてなかったんじゃないか、実は参加してなかったんじゃないか、体験してなかったんじゃないかということを言うために取り上げたんだと思うんだけど、このカテゴライズから始まるんだと思うんですけど、ただ僕がこういうことをすごく慎重に考えたい方で、例えば女性が、女性の権利を含めて 集まったからそれだけで、表彰すればいいってわけではなくて、やっぱりナショナリティやエスニシティも背負ってそれぞれ別々の場所から来て集まってるわけですよね。でその当時の、発展しつつある日本の経済を含めてそれが一つの話題になるということは非常に自然なことで、だから良かったと思ったと、とりあえず思ったと。でそういう発言は良くないっていうと、心を支配することになりかねないかと、そう思うこと自体は否定できないし、それを言葉にすることも黙らせることができない。そうじゃない、それを受け止めた上で、じゃあなぜそれがわざわざ公式な文章として残されるかということを考えてしまうと、やはり体験経験が少なかったんだというふうに話をダイナミックに持ってってくれると、何のためにカテゴライズしてるかっていうことが出てくると思うんですけど、ちょっとこうなんていうのかな、ある種これ自体がこういう発言は良くないよね、こういう発言があるべきだという、逆に相手を黙らせるだけの一つの癖を感じてしまうんで、ちょっと気になりました。
はい、とても重要なご指摘というかはい、いただきましてありがとうございます。そうですね、なんていうか20分の報告でどう整理するかっていうので悩んだので、こういう書き方になりましたけれども、おっしゃられた通りですね、実際ですね女性と一口に言ってもいろんなナショナリティの人、エスニシティの人があそこに加わっていて、で当然ですね、これフェミニズムの重要な論点ですけれども、第一世界の女性と第三世界の女性、これやっぱり大きな論争のテーマになるわけですね。だからやっぱりこの私が今報告で書いた論点もですね、その問題と接続しながら改めてこう語りの回想を読み直していくっていう作業がこれから求められると思っております。なのでとってもそこ大事なことで、そのダイナミックに描きなさいっていうコメントとも関わりますけれども、その点をもうちょっとしっかりとこれから深めていきたいと考えております。どうもありがとうございました。
では時間となりましたので以上となります。どうもありがとうございました。それでは、今からですね休憩の時間を少し取らせていただきます。7分程度